Welcome to Tricity Community Television. I'm your host, Mandara Lebovitz, in downtown Port Coquitlam. With us in studio today is our guest, Priscilla Omulo. She's here to speak to us about tough conversation about the effects of family violence. Priscilla, welcome.
Thank you.
We'd like to speak to you today about your movie, The Lantern. This is a very personal movie for you. I saw the trailer, and it seems that you're following very much your own personal story and how it's affected you and it can affect others by sharing this story. Can you tell us about the movie a little bit?
Yeah, so I was inspired to write it through some personal experience that I'd had. I do find writing to be very therapeutic and very healing, and so I had decided to just write. And when I initially started, I wasn't sure that it was going to be something that we would actually film and create, but my husband is actually in film as well, and so it was just a partnership that naturally started to flow, and we decided it was a project that we really wanted to pursue for both of us, because he has been a huge supporter in what I've been going through and through that healing process.
What specific personal experiences do you relay in the movie?
I really wanted it to not just be about my story, but also talking about family violence in the fact that it's not just intimate partner violence, and that it can also be physical, mental, it can be financial, sexual, that there's different types of violence that happens. So in the film itself, I tried to portray in different families these different types of violence, so people may be able to relate or better understand those differences.
How so? How are people going to understand those differences at home? You know, they're sitting here watching and they're wondering, am I a victim? How would they recognize that?
I'm hoping that with the film, that when they're watching what this family is going through, because it's a daily basis occurrence in the way that I wrote it. So I'm hoping that if it touches on them in that way, if it does have them question, then it's done its job. We're not there to tell people what it is exactly, because, for example, financial violence for one family may look different than another, but to recognize that there is some level of power or authority in a family that is unbalanced, then that's where we want people to question and recognize those differences.
What is financial violence?
So that could be if there is one partner who takes over all of the finances without being able to have the other person be able to get themselves a cup of coffee, be able to do bigger purchases themselves without having to ask questions. If you're not given enough money to be able to do something, and then you're called out on it and made to look incompetent, say, for example.
I've seen the trailer, and again, in the trailer, you're the actress in the trailer, and you have a black eye. And the voiceover of the narrator in the trailer says, "You are not alone, and this is not your fault." How come so many people believe that violence is their fault on whatever level, financial, sexual, physical?
I think that's one of the stages of violence in itself. When you do start to do work with survivors of violence, you recognize that there are stages. There's a honeymoon phase, and then there's the outburst, and then there's this kind of calm, and you go back to honeymoon stage. So when that happens, it's about that power and control. So there's a lot of manipulation that happens in certain types of violence, and so a lot of people start to blame themselves because they recognize, oh, well, if I don't have dinner ready by 5 o'clock, then I know that it's going to make my partner upset, without recognizing that that is not your responsibility, that is not your fault, that their level of control and anger and whatever they're putting on you, it starts to become a routine without even knowing that.
What do you believe the intentions are of the abuser, especially toward family members and so-called loved ones? What is their intention in using violence?
Just from my own healing and from what I've learned with my education and employment experience, a lot of times it is about power and control, and you take a look at what's happening right now with the Me Too movement, and a lot of people saying that sexualized violence is about sex. It's not. It's about power and control. So a lot of times it's about somebody being able to have that control over somebody. And so they use what means that they can, whether it be, sexualized violence or physical violence.
What was the intention you may have had, or people in general have, in staying in a violent relationship? I'm not talking about kids, because of course that's a different situation, but once you become an adult and you have choice, you choose to stay in a relationship, right?
I think that some of it, that could be a misconception. For some people, it's different for different reasons why people stay. Sometimes it could be that you believe the person's going to change. When you go through that honeymoon phase and they say, oh, I'm sorry, I'll go to counseling. Oh, I'm sorry, I won't do that ever again. You believe them. You want to believe them because you love the person. But there's also a lot of systemic barriers for a lot of people who end up in a violent relationship or in a violent family where you may not be financially stable enough to be able to leave. You may be concerned about sharing assets. There's a lot of racism and gender and other minority groups that do suffer higher amounts of violence. Like as an Indigenous person, a lot of Indigenous women experience violence. But there's also a lot of racism and discrimination in society that prevents them from being able to seek the resources and being able to leave those situations.
What did it take for you to make the decision to leave the violent relationship you were in?
I think it was the fact that I missed my family. I didn't realize how segregated I was and how much control there was until I really wanted to see my mom, and realizing that I didn't have that opportunity, that I made a choice that I wanted to go home.
Tell me about your relationship with your mother.
I'm really close to my mother in that we've been through a lot together. I am a product of the intergenerational effects of residential school. So my mom's 5 of her 6 brothers went, and there's a lot of healing my family had to do. It took a long time for me to recognize that what she's been through impacted my childhood and impacted the way I've grown up. And so she has also been a good inspiration for me to be able to share, because she's proud of me when I do. Yeah.
I'm sure she's proud of you today. Because speaking about our pain, speaking about victimization and suffering abuse, it puts us in a very vulnerable place. And can you speak to the effects of being vulnerable and how maybe being vulnerable is useful in this context?
That was actually something I didn't fully expect initially. I knew that I was really passionate and wanted to write this and had all these actors. And when we even cast people, I was like wanting them to recognize that it is a vulnerable place to be. And if they've had personal experience, or if they just wanted to be a part of a project that was like this, I didn't want to cast anyone who wouldn't have the same messaging. And so when we started to build this team and start working together and we're doing these long days, we got to know each other and we got to hear each other's stories. And we realized, yes, we were building this relationship. We didn't even think that was going to happen because we're all in this vulnerable place. And it sucked a lot of energy out of a lot of us to be able to do it, because
You were triggered in some way. Everyone is sort of triggered by the topic.
yes.
I'm assuming.
Yeah.
So this was an emotional experience for you, making this project. How has it been cathartic for you, if at all?
It has because it's one of those moments, and I think other people who have experienced violence will have a moment of, I'm taking my power back. And so that's kind of what it felt like. And being able to share my story and hear other people, when we had our screening in December, hearing other people say, I understood that. I could feel because I've been through, and then having them share. In those moments, like it felt like this is the healing that needs to happen, and we've been able to help open that door. And that in itself was so healing and so empowering that it was well worth it.
Where else do we need to be having these kinds of conversations where family violence, domestic abuse is in the spotlight. Where do we need to be having those?
I think that there isn't anywhere that we really couldn't have these conversations. It's interesting because there are things I didn't think about that now that I've done the film and now that we've talked about it a lot more, it's opened my eyes to even my own dark areas of knowledge when it comes to violence, and taking a look at how we could help people in our workplaces, how we could better understand students whose parents may be experiencing violence in the home and how that affects children. Even just within our friendships with people, when you're being supportive of somebody that you know, and they're not ready to tell you, but what is it that you do? You can't tell somebody to leave.
What questions could you ask people who you believe to be suffering from some sort of abuse?
I think some of the good questions are you safe? Are you okay? Is there anything I can do, if ever? Even just that, if there's ever anything I can do to help you, if there's anything that you need, just let me know. Because that in itself is one of those sentences that leaves the door open to, someday they may ask you to hold on to some cash. Someday they may ask you to watch their dog. Like, there's different things that some people may need that they can't say that they need because it's unsafe to say that they need it. So not telling them, because you're taking that power from them again when you do that.
What impact are you hoping that this film will have on our community?
I'm hoping that it continues to inspire people to share their story, to create a safe space for people to be able to learn more about family violence, or again, to ask for help. I feel like with the film itself, it's not available online freely for people to watch, because I want it to be somewhere where people can sit, watch, share, and have that safe space to be able to ask for help if they need to, or ask a question if they want to. I mean, I've had some backlash from people saying, well, there's violence against men too. And I've had to explain that I recognize that, but there are higher percentages of violence against women. There's higher percentages of violence against people who are LGBTQ+, people who are, of different abilities. So that's where we want to kind of put our resources in saying that we want more equity, we want more support, we want more society understanding of what it is to really recognize the differences with gender and that inequality.
So what organizations are you looking to screen the film? Where are you hoping to see the film being screened?
I think that it would be really nice to have some screenings with organizations like Battered Women Support Services, ATIRA, Helping Spirit Lodge Society, organizations that are already established in supporting women, and hopefully then highlighting the work that they do, as well as kind of getting some more education and awareness. But I would also really like to see it in a lot of colleges and universities, as many as we could, because I feel like that is a good opportunity for people as they're in this stage of transition and education and wanting to learn as much as they can in a safe environment, that it's a good demographic to be able to kind of draw people in. And
Wonderful. Where can people who want to screen the film find you?
they could find me on my website. There's also a Priscilla Omulo Facebook page. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you for being my guest today. Really appreciate you being so vulnerable and speaking today with us. Thanks so much for watching.